My name is Claire Harlow. I'm 31 years old. By the time I turned onto our street that afternoon, I was already angry. Not the sharp, explosive kind of anger, the dull, grinding kind you get from years of being taken for granted. Work had been hell. My supervisor dumped a last-minute report on my desk and forgot to mention it had to be done before I left. I still managed to finish it, but not before getting a notification on my phone. The property tax bill had auto-drafted, leaving my checking account $300 lighter. $300 I had transferred that morning to cover a bill they somehow forgot. Again. On top of that, my younger brother Noah had texted me around 10 a.m. like it was nothing. Hey, can you spot me for a new laptop? The one you got me last year is already lagging, lol. No, please, no thanks, just expected, like the sun rising. I didn't live the way I did for nothing. I didn't take every overtime shift offered, didn't spend weekends patching up that old house, replacing shingles, fixing leaky pipes, and covering my brother's tuition so I could be treated like a disposable ATM with feet. I sure as hell didn't spend my 20s co-signing loans and paying for groceries so I could be walked on by a family that never respected me. They never earned the help I gave them. First, they were supposed to help themselves. Second, they were supposed to have my back when I needed it. They did neither. They treated me like a backup generator, silent, always running in the background, only noticed when the power went out. When I stepped into the house, something felt wrong. No TV blaring talk shows, no hum of the dishwasher, no constant background commentary from my dad cursing at the news. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't happen by accident. I closed the door softly and stood there for a moment listening. Nothing. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe Dad was napping. Maybe Mom was out. Maybe Noah had finally gone to campus on time for once. I took a breath and headed down the hallway toward my room, the faucet aerator I'd picked up for the kitchen still in my hand. The moment I stepped through the doorway, my heart stopped. My room was gutted. Not just tidied up, not rearranged, gutted. The bed I'd slept in since I was 15. Gone. My shelves. Empty. The photos, the stupid lava lamp my ex gave me as a joke, the stack of books by my nightstand, the old hoodie I kept draped over the chair, all of it vanished. The walls were bare and scuffed where my frames had been. And in the bed, my bed, or where my bed used to be, was Noah, sleeping. On a new mattress, my old headboard now his, with his sneakers tossed carelessly in the corner. His duffel bag half open on the floor, his faded poster already tacked up where my calendar had been. His cologne hung in the air, sour and sharp, overlaying the faint traces of my citrus body spray like a slap. His makeup bag equivalent, grooming kit, deodorant, charger, cluttered the nightstand that used to hold my journal. For a second, I honestly thought I'd walked into the wrong room, that some weird home renovation had moved mine somewhere else. Then I saw my dresser. It was gone. I stood there, frozen, trying to make the pieces fit. Maybe something happened. Maybe they were remodeling. Maybe my things were temporarily stored. My mom's footsteps behind me answered that. She didn't hurry. She didn't sound guilty. She just walked down the hall like it was any other day. When she stopped just behind my shoulder, she didn't gasp or apologize or even clear her throat. She just said it, flatly, like she was commenting on the weather. "We voted," she said. "You don't live here anymore." That was it. No build-up, no explanation, no, "I'm sorry." Just a statement, like a verdict had already been read and filed. I didn't turn around. I stared at Noah, asleep in a bed I'd paid for, in a room I'd furnished, in a house I'd kept from collapsing more times than they knew. This was the same brother whose textbooks I'd bought, whose late-night gas runs I'd funded, who rolled his eyes and called me uptight whenever I said no to some luxury he wanted. Now he was snoring gently in a space that had been mine, dreaming about whatever it is 20-year-olds dream about when they don't worry about how bills get paid. I didn't say anything. Didn't ask why, because I already knew. They didn't respect me. They never had. I'd spent years pretending that being the reliable one would one day earn me a seat at the table. Maybe not praise, but at least a little respect. That being the one who always showed up, who always paid, who always fixed things, meant I mattered. But this wasn't about fairness or gratitude. This was about power. I had it, and they hated me for it. Silently, I turned away from the doorway and walked down the hall. My mother didn't follow. She didn't call out. She didn't say my name. She just let me walk. At the hall closet, I pulled out my old duffel bag, the same one I'd used when I moved back home to help out after Dad's business had a rough year. I packed what little they hadn't touched. A few folded shirts and jeans from the top shelf in the laundry room, the folder with my documents, birth certificate, social security card, passport, from the safe I'd insisted on buying. My phone charger, a worn paperback I'd left on the coffee table. Most of my life was already out of the house anyway. My savings, my work, my skills, the rest was replaceable. They didn't say a word as I walked back toward the front door. I could feel Mom standing in the kitchen, arms probably crossed, jaw set. I could hear the faint static of the TV turn back on low, somewhere in the living room. No one stopped me. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream or cry or ask them how they could do this. I didn't beg them to let me stay in the house I'd kept afloat. I just stepped outside, felt the air hit my face, and pulled the door shut behind me. On the porch, I paused, keys in my hand. Not because I was second-guessing, because for the first time, I realized something important. I had always been the one holding this entire house together, and they had just cut themselves off from the only person who knew where the duct tape was. That night, I slept on my coworker Justin's couch. We weren't even that close, just worked a few construction-adjacent jobs together when I helped out on weekends. But when I called and said, I need somewhere to crash, he didn't ask questions. His couch was lumpy. The blanket he handed me smelled faintly like dog. The fan in the corner rattled. It was the most peaceful place I'd slept in years. I didn't cry. Not once. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying my mother's voice. We voted. You don't live here anymore. What I thought about wasn't going back. It wasn't what I'd lost. What I thought about was everything they'd taken for granted. The bills they never paid. The business loan I co-signed for my dad so he could keep his shop open. The roofs I helped replace when we couldn't afford a contractor. The furnace I paid for during that brutal winter. The groceries I bought every week. The tuition. The cell phone plans. The gas in everyone else's tanks. And now, they voted me out. Fine. Let them feel what life is like without me. Let them learn what it costs to live without a backup generator, quietly humming in the background. Because the next time they came crawling, and I knew, with the surety of someone who's seen the same pattern on repeat, that I wasn't going to slam the door in their faces. I would leave it open, but I would make damn sure they regretted ever walking through it. The first 2 weeks after I left were pure, almost unreal silence. No calls, no texts, not even a lazy, hope you're okay. It was like I'd been erased from the group chat of my own family. Part of me had expected my mom to call in a panic the minute she realized I'd taken my name off the utility bills. I gave them 5 days' notice, more than I legally owed them, and stopped the auto pays I'd set up years ago. Let them see what groceries cost without my card at the register. Let them feel a shut-off notice in their own names for once. Justin didn't ask many questions, but he did hand me a spare key. Stay as long as you need, he said. We sat on his mismatched second-hand sofa, our feet up on an overturned milk crate masquerading as a coffee table, watching some stupid movie neither of us really liked, just because it was there. His apartment was small and a little chaotic, but there was no tension in the air, no expectation, no one waiting to pounce with a new crisis. That couch became the most peaceful place I'd known in years. The first Monday after I left, I woke up expecting my phone to be full of emergencies. It wasn't. A couple of work emails, a spam text, nothing from home. I went to work, put my head down, and told my boss I'd moved out and was staying with a friend for a while. He raised an eyebrow, but just said, "If you need anything, let me know." At lunch, I found myself staring at my phone, not because I wanted to go back, but because I wanted to see how long they'd hold out before realizing they'd kicked out the one person making sure the lights stayed on. Around the end of that first week, I called the credit card company. There was a card in my name that I'd let Dad use for emergencies, gas, supplies, maybe a repair here and there. Emergencies in our house had turned into fast food runs, cigar packs, and a weekend rental in Traverse City I definitely hadn't known about. The balance sat at $1,100 I hadn't authorized. I paid it off, closed the account, and felt something uncoil in my chest as the customer service rep said, "All right, Ms. Harlow, that card is now fully canceled. No more swiping my name at the pump." Next was the joint account. Years ago, Mom had convinced me to co-sign just in case. Just in case had turned into a slow siphon of my money into overdraft fees and mystery purchases. I went to the bank in person, sat with a bored-looking representative and said, "I want my name off any account that isn't exclusively mine." When the paperwork was done and my money safely moved into a new bank entirely, I walked out feeling 10 pounds lighter. They wouldn't even notice until their next auto payment bounced. I transferred all the house utilities completely into their names. I'd already requested my removal, but now I followed up, making sure I saw their information where mine used to be. Gas, their numbers. Electric, their billing address. Internet, their card on file. No more late notices forwarded to my email. No more 11 p.m. calls that started with, "Why is the bill so high?" I was done being the live-in accountant they never paid. Then I waited. A week slid into 2. The phone stayed eerily quiet. No come home, no we overreacted, not even a did you get your things? I went to work, went to the gym after work for the first time in months, started sleeping through the night without waking up to the sound of someone calling my name from down the hall because the Wi-Fi was out or the sink was clogged or the car wouldn't start. I kept waiting for the panic, for the inevitable, "Claire, we need you." It didn't come. Around the 3rd week, my cousin Derek texted. "Hey," he wrote, "I heard you moved out suddenly. You good?" I stared at the words "moved out suddenly." That meant they were already spinning it. Of course they were. In their version, I had just gotten tired and needed space. I had stormed off. Not that they had literally voted me out of my own house. Not that my mother had stood behind me in a gutted doorway and said, "You don't live here anymore." "I'm fine," I replied, "just taking space and sorting some things out." He didn't push, but the phrasing stuck with me all day. Moved out suddenly. They'd glossed over their part entirely. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let this slide quietly. I started going to the gym more regularly, not just to burn off stress, but because movement felt like reclaiming my body from the constant tension. I saved every extra dollar I could, not for them, but to build something that was mine. I started cooking cheap meals with Justin, laughing over burnt rice and oversalted eggs, feeling a kind of lightness that came from knowing the only person I had to take care of that night was myself. The quiet was strange at first. I kept bracing for the phone to ring with some urgent demand. It didn't. No one called asking why the energy company was suddenly messaging them directly. No one reached out to ask about the missing credit card line. No one asked why the emergency joint account wasn't there to catch the overdrafts. But silence, as I've learned, is rarely permanent when people are used to having someone clean up their mess. By the time the 4th month rolled around, I'd almost made peace with the idea that they might never call. I spent Christmas on Justin's couch, eating takeout and watching holiday movies that were ironically less depressing than the real thing. No invitation came. No come over for dinner, no gift exchange plans. I thought about the tree I'd bought the year before, the ornaments I'd paid for, the pile of presents under it, all of them from me, tagged with love from all of us, because they didn't even bother to sign their own names. Now I was the ghost. January arrived with snow and payday, and with it, the first crack in their pride. My phone rang. The caller ID said Mom. I watched it buzz on the coffee table. Once, twice, 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, another call. Then another. By the end of the week, she'd left 5 voicemails. Each one started the same way. "Claire, we need to talk." She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "We were wrong." Just, "We need to talk." Like this was a minor disagreement we could patch over with a cup of tea and a heavy dose of denial. I didn't call back. In February, the voicemails multiplied. 17 by mid-month. All starting with, "Claire, we need to talk." Followed by different variations of, "Things are hard," and "We're family," and "You can't stay mad forever." I could actually. Then Derek texted again. "You hear about the house?" he wrote. "No," I replied. "What about it?" He hesitated in those 3 blinking dots for a long time before sending a flurry of messages. A pipe had burst in the laundry room and flooded half the basement. My dad's business had taken a massive hit. He was behind on payments. Noah had dropped out of his last semester and was back home restructuring his goals, which translated to sleeping in late and doing nothing. They were floundering. And then, in April, the pattern changed. I got a voicemail that didn't start with "We need to talk." It started with 4 words I had been expecting in some form since the day I walked out. "We made a mistake." Just that. Small, flat. Followed by a stumbling attempt at justification I barely listened to. 2 days later, another voicemail. "We made a mistake, Claire." By the start of May, I had 59 voicemails, all beginning with the same line. "We made a mistake." That's when I decided it was time to call them back. Not because they deserved it, because I finally realized something else. If I was going to reopen that door at all, it was going to be on my terms, not theirs. I waited until a Wednesday afternoon to call, midweek, midday, the time I knew they'd all be home. Dad rarely left the house anymore. Mom hadn't had a job in years, and Noah was back living under their roof like nothing had ever happened. They had spent 4 months pretending I didn't exist, and now suddenly they were desperate. Good. Let them sit with it. The phone rang once, twice. Then my mother answered with a breathless, too bright, too hopeful, "Claire?" I didn't respond right away. I wanted the silence to stretch, to remind her she didn't automatically get access to me anymore. When I finally said, "Hi, Mom," I could practically hear the air leave her lungs, like she'd been holding her breath for months. She launched immediately into her performance. "Oh, honey, things haven't been the same without you. We've all had time to reflect, and we miss you so much, and there's been so much going on, and—" I didn't interrupt, not because I cared, because I wanted to hear how far she'd twist herself into an apology without ever admitting what she did. And she did it. She talked for almost 5 minutes without saying a single concrete thing. Not one, "I'm sorry we voted you out." Not one, "I regret how we treated you." Just vague self-pity disguised as remorse. When she finally paused, I said the thing she'd been waiting months to hear. "I'll help." The silence on her end wasn't relief. It was something heavier: fear, confusion, anticipation. Then she exhaled, shaky and relieved. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything. Just tell us what you need." I let her cling to that hope for a beat. Then I added calmly, "But it will be on my terms." Another pause, shorter, more hesitant. "Of course," she said, voice thin. "Whatever you need." "Anything?" I repeated. "Yes, anything." I almost smiled. "Good. I'll call back tonight with instructions." That night, when I dialed again, she answered instantly. This time, Noah was on speaker too. I could hear him breathing awkwardly, like a kid about to be scolded. Dad didn't speak, but I could hear his quiet grumbles in the background, his version of being present. I didn't waste time. "I'll help," I said, "but not until you do exactly what I say." No one objected. They just waited. "First," I continued, "there will be no money until everything is completed exactly as I outline. Not a cent." I could practically hear Dad's jaw clench. "Second," I said, "I want a full family gathering. Extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone who believed every story you've ever told about me." Mom inhaled sharply. "Claire, do we have to involve everyone? This is private." "No," I said, "it isn't. You turned it into a public narrative. You told everyone I moved out suddenly and needed a break. You made it public. Now you correct it publicly." She didn't answer. That was good. She knew I was right. "Third," I said, "at this gathering, you will read from a list I provide, word for word." "A list?" Noah muttered. "Yes," I said, "of every major thing you did or allowed to happen to me. No editing, no revisions." "Claire," Mom tried to protest. "If you truly want my help," I said, "you'll read it." Silence. Long enough that I wondered if they'd hang up. But then Mom whispered, "Okay." "And Noah," I continued, "you'll read your own list. Every insult, every time you used me, every time you mocked me for working while you freeloaded." He swallowed so loudly I heard it through the speaker. "Oh, okay." "And Dad," I paused. "He won't speak," I said. "He will sit and listen. That's all he ever did anyway." A low grumble came from the background. Offended, defensive, but he said nothing. Of course he didn't. When you spend years staying silent while enabling harm, silence becomes your only talent. They didn't ask what the list contained. They didn't argue anymore. They agreed, not because they truly understood what they'd done, but because they thought this was a transaction. Embarrass themselves for a few minutes, collect the money afterward. They had no idea. 2 weeks later, the spectacle happened. I arrived at the house I used to pay for. They had set everything up in the backyard. Folding chairs in rows, a plastic table with pitchers of lemonade sweating in the sun, cheap snack trays, soft music playing, as if this were a cookout and not their public reckoning. Relatives were already there, people who had rolled their eyes at me at holidays, whispered behind my back, and accepted every version of the story my parents fed them. They smiled awkwardly when I walked in. Good, let them squirm. Mom stood at the front with the sheet of paper I'd emailed her. She looked at it like it was a blade. "Go ahead," I said gently. She started reading. Her voice trembled at first, but she didn't stop. "I allowed my daughter to pay for nearly every household bill without offering to contribute. I let my son live rent-free while she struggled. I encouraged my children to mock and belittle her. I dismissed her every time she asked for basic respect. I voted to remove her from the home she financially supported. I betrayed her trust. The air felt thick, like shame had weight. Relatives looked everywhere except at me. Then Noah stepped up, and his voice cracked. I called Claire a loser. I took money from her wallet. I used her car without asking. I let her pay for my tuition and laughed at her behind her back. I said she was boring and had no life while she was the reason I had one. Then, for the first time in years, he looked up at me. I was wrong, he said softly. I'm sorry. I felt something in me shift. Not forgiveness, but a kind of closure. Then came the question I knew was coming. So, does this mean you'll help us now? I looked at them. Mom with her trembling paper, Noah red-faced, Dad staring at the dirt. I smiled politely. I'll be in touch. And I walked out. They thought that was the finish line. They thought humiliation equals payday. They thought they'd done the hard part. They had no idea the real test was still coming. They didn't even make it 48 hours before calling again. My phone lit up at 9:17 p.m. the next night. Mom's name. I let it ring twice before answering. Claire, she breathed, like she'd been holding her lungs hostage. We did everything you asked. The reading, the family meeting, the admissions, everything. So, what happens next? Do you need my banking information, or should we meet in person to sign something? There it was. They still thought this was a transaction. I leaned back on Justin's couch and said evenly, before anything happens, I need details. Documents. Proof you're telling the truth about the house and the business. Silence. Then slowly, of course, whatever you need. I requested bank statements, overdue notices, repair invoices, business records, photos of the damage. Within hours, my inbox pinged with PDFs and grainy pictures of a basement pipe that had exploded like an angry geyser. Mold crawling up drywall. Unpaid bills stacked like dominoes. A furnace I paid for 3 years ago on its last legs because no one ever serviced it. The business ledger made my jaw clench. Dad wasn't just struggling. He had taken out a private loan at an obscene interest rate, the kind only people with no other options sign. Their entire financial existence was collapsing, and they expected me to play savior again. So I told them what they wanted to hear. I'm considering it, I said, but this time I want you to come to me. Where? Mom asked quickly. I gave her the address of a conference room I rented by the hour. Neutral ground. No emotional theater. No backyard theatrics. No snacks. No relatives. No hiding behind family dynamics. Professional, clinical, cold. Just like they deserved. We'll be there, she said. 2 days later, they walked in together. Mom wore her serious outfit. Noah fidgeted with the blazer I'd bought him 2 years ago. Dad had shaved, which told me everything. He wanted to look respectable. They sat across from me at the table, waiting for a check that would save their house, their lifestyle, their pride. Instead, I slid a folder toward them. Not money. A contract. Mom's smile faltered immediately. Noah's eyes narrowed. Dad's jaw tightened. What's this? He asked. Your terms, I said. Mom flipped open the first page. Her face drained. Because the contract wasn't financial support. It was accountability. Real accountability. The kind they could not weasel out of. The terms were simple. Each of them had to post a full written confession on their personal social media, detailing exactly how they treated me, publicly, permanently, without framing themselves as victims. Each had to write a handwritten, mailed apology letter to every relative who had ever heard their lies about me. No copy-pasting, no group message. Individual letters, acknowledging real harm. They would sign a notarized agreement stating they would never again ask me for any financial help, ever. Any future request would void everything. They would relinquish any claim, current or future, to the inheritance my grandfather left me, something they'd quietly schemed for years to intercept. No contact without my explicit permission. Dad stood up so fast his chair screeched. This is humiliation, he snapped. You want us to grovel? To make us look weak? I stared at him. Weak isn't the problem. Dishonest is. Mom whispered, trembling. Claire, is any of this really necessary? Yes, I said. But you said you'd help. And I will, I said, if you complete every one of these requirements first. Noah rubbed his forehead. This is insane. And so, I said quietly, was voting me out of a home I paid for. We all do insane things, don't we? They didn't sign. Not then. I didn't expect them to. I told them to take it home and think. Then I left, before they could try to guilt me, argue, manipulate, or cry. A week passed. Not a word. Then Derek texted me. You should see FBRN, he wrote. Your mom posted something wild. I opened the screenshot. It was her, on her public profile, posting, word for word, the confession I had written, admitting everything. No excuses, no rewrites, no sugarcoating. Below it was Noah's post. Then, unbelievably, Dad's. He typed his, and under all his usual bluster, there it was. I pushed my daughter out of her own home. I abused her generosity. I failed her as a father. My phone rang again. Unknown number. It was Mom. We signed, she said, voice hollow. All of us. We did everything. Everything. Now, can we talk about the money? I let the silence stretch. Then I gave them the final truth. There is no money. The line went dead silent. What? She whispered. The inheritance you thought I was about to receive? I said calmly. It's gone. I used it to buy my condo, pay my debts, and invest in my own future. I don't have anything left to give you. You lied, she whispered, voice cracking. You voted, I said, remember? Her breath hitched. Then she hung up. I thought that was the end. I underestimated their desperation. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a printed email thread between my parents and my uncle. They were trying to explore legal options to recover misallocated family funds. They were coming after me, again. They were trying to invent a claim that I owed them money. I almost laughed. They didn't know that I had been documenting everything, every payment, every repair, every tuition check, every receipt, every auto-pay confirmation, for years. I sent one email to my uncle, to my aunts, to every relative who'd ever believed their lies. Subject line, for transparency. Inside, a link to a shared folder, years of receipts, screenshots, invoices, bank transfers, proof. No commentary. No explanation. Just truth. The next day, I got texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. We had no idea. I'm so sorry. They lied to all of us. Then came the final blow. A call from Jared, an old friend who worked at a junior accounting firm. Claire, I found something. You need to see this. My father had listed me, without my permission, as a silent partner in his business on a loan application. Identity fraud. Financial misconduct. I called my lawyer within an hour. We filed formal complaints within 3 days. And that's when everything collapsed. When people say rock bottom changes a person, they usually mean it in a poetic way. A journey, a revelation, a humbling. But my family, they hit rock bottom and immediately started digging. After the identity fraud claim was filed, everything started unraveling faster than even I expected. My lawyer, Ms. Ellery, moved fast. She filed for an audit of my father's business accounts, the fraudulent loan documents, and initiated an inquiry into misuse of my personal information. She warned me it could get messy. I told her I didn't care. What was happening wasn't vengeance, it was consequence. And consequences have a rhythm. First, the business account froze. Then vendors started demanding overdue payments. Then the private lender, someone who clearly didn't operate with gentle repayment reminders, began calling nonstop. Within a week, the business door was locked, the lights shut off, and the storefront was empty, except for a closed until further notice sign that never came down. Further notice sign. I didn't have to lift a finger. Every domino I knew existed finally toppled into the next. Then came the voicemail I didn't expect. Not from my mom, not from my dad, not even from a blocked number. It was Noah. His voice cracked 3 words into the message. Claire, please call me. I didn't. He left another. Claire, seriously, I didn't know about Dad using your name. I swear. Please, just please call me. I didn't. On the 3rd voicemail, he cried. Hearing Noah cry was strange. He'd always been loud, arrogant, careless. Someone who acted like the world would always hand him what he wanted. Hearing him sound small threw me off balance for a moment. Just a moment, because then he said it. You're destroying us. And the moment of softness snapped like a dry twig. No, I thought. You destroyed yourselves when you kicked out the only person holding the house together. I deleted the voicemail. Blocked the number. Again. The next attempt came from Mom, then Dad, then Mom again. All ignored. Then came a 4th attempt, from a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up because I thought it might be a work call. It wasn't. Claire, it's your cousin Bree. I stiffened. Bree and I weren't close. Not enemies. Just background relatives. She sighed on the line. I think you need to know they're trying something else. Of course they were. She forwarded screenshots of group messages, Mom telling family members I was emotionally unstable, Dad claiming I had dragged lawyers into a misunderstanding, Noah whining that I was punishing them beyond reason. But the family wasn't buying it this time, not after seeing the receipts I'd shared, not after reading their public confessions. The tide was turning, and for the first time in my life, the extended family wasn't whispering behind my back. They were defending me. Then came the final escalation. They showed up at my building, unannounced. I saw them before they saw me. Mom clutching a stack of papers, eyes red, Noah pacing anxiously, Dad leaning against the wall, arms crossed like he had any authority left. They looked small, tired, frayed around the edges, and desperate, always desperate. I almost felt something. Almost. Then Mom spotted me. "Claire," she called, something like hope breaking in her voice. I froze for a second, not because I doubted myself, but because part of me expected them to start screaming. They didn't. They looked defeated. "We just want to talk," Mom said quietly, stepping closer but not touching the door. No money, no demands, just closure. If she had said that 11 months ago, maybe something inside me would have softened. But now? Now I had clarity carved into me like a stone tablet. I kept one hand on the building's glass door, holding it half open, the barrier between us literal and symbolic. "Talk about what?" I asked. Mom swallowed. "About everything. About us. About fixing this." Noah looked up finally, eyes rimmed red. "We know we messed up. We know we hurt you." Dad said nothing. Of course he didn't. Then Mom whispered, "We have nothing left, Claire. Nowhere to go. I can't stay in that house. Your sister's miserable. Your father won't speak. Please, let's just start over." Her voice cracked on start over. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the mother I had once wanted so badly to believe existed. The mother who should have protected me, not exploited me. The mother who should have held her family together, not broken the only daughter who tried. But that mother was a myth. The woman in front of me had voted me out of my own home. She had only chased me down when she needed me again. Desperation isn't love. Regret isn't accountability. And closure doesn't require conversation. I took a breath. Slow, deep. "No," I said softly. They all froze. Mom blinked. "No?" "You voted," I said, voice steady. "Remember?" The words hit each of them differently. Dad stiffened. Mom's face crumpled. Noah's hands dropped to his sides. I didn't yell. I didn't justify. I didn't explain. I simply stepped inside and let the door close. They didn't chase me, didn't pound on the glass, didn't scream or plead. They just stood there. When the door clicked shut behind me, it sounded like the end of something old, brittle, and long overdue. It has been 11 months since I walked out of that gutted room. 9 since their backyard confessions. 7 since they realized no money was coming. 4 since I filed a complaint against my father. 2 since they showed up, trying to squeeze one last apology into something that could save them. And now? Silence. Real silence. Not the tense kind, not the manipulative kind, not the kind that waits for me to fold. Just absence. Honest, peaceful absence. According to Derek, the house was foreclosed. They moved in with a distant cousin who posts Bible verses on Facebook and side-eyes everyone at Thanksgiving. The business dissolved quietly. No announcements, no posts, no legacy, just a shuttered storefront. Noah works front desk at a salon now. He still posts Instagram stories smiling at angles that don't reach his eyes. Mom hasn't tried to contact me again. Dad hasn't either. Maybe they've finally understood something. Maybe not. It doesn't matter, because I have. I live in a condo on the edge of the city now. Small balcony, big windows, quiet mornings, sunlight instead of shouting. Peace instead of pressure. I make coffee in silence. I answer only the calls I want to. I cook what I like. I clean only my own mess. I sleep without bracing for footsteps or emergencies. I took a solo trip to Oregon last month. Hiked cliffs. Ate alone in diners. Watched the ocean until it felt like mine. And somewhere on that coastline, staring at the water, I realized something. Closure isn't them apologizing. Closure is me no longer needing them to. Closure is choosing myself, firmly, unapologetically, every single day. And most importantly, closure is not looking back.